Hello, this is a demonstration on ultra slow practice, which is one of the things that I love to do, and I hope that by the end of this video I will have encouraged you not only of the need to do it and the value behind doing it, but also that you can really enjoy it. And I think that's the problem with slow practice. People feel like it's the equivalent of taking medicine, or it's eating spinach or something that we really don't want to do, whereas in fact it can be seriously enjoyable and, dare I venture to suggest, meditative. Thing to remember, it's not only for beginners. A lot of people seem to have this feeling that slow practice, oh, that's what you do when you start playing the piano, or that's what you do when you start learning a new piece. Actually, we need it for maintenance as much as we do for learning, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But if I could just remind you of the Rachmaninoff story that I love to quote. It's in Abram Chasin's book, Speaking of Pianists. It's one of the most inspiring books, I think, on piano playing. Rachmaninoff was practicing the Etude in Thirds by Chopin so slowly that his colleagues didn't recognize what piece it was. Now, we're talking about Rachmaninoff, one of the world's great pianists, 20th century's great pianists, and certainly great musicians. We're talking about a piece that he had played before. He wasn't learning it, he was refining it, he was maintaining it, and he was doing it so slowly that the author didn't recognize what piece it was. So if you're serious about playing the piano, there's no escaping it, but I think let's just remember it's used by professional concert pianists as well as beginners, and like everything else we do at the piano, it needs to be done with concentration, careful listening, and it has to sound good and it has to feel good. It's not mechanical, it's not mindless, it's quite the opposite of that. Let's have a little look at it. So when we're learning a new piece, I'm going to show you something that actually I am learning new, and it's a little piece by Svelink called Mein junges Leben hat ein Ende. In other words, my young life has an end. I am learning it at what one of my colleagues, Lucinda Mackworth-Young, likes to call the speed of no mistakes. So that means there's no way I can make a mistake because I've got so much thinking time before every note that I play. What do? I notice patterns, I notice harmonies, I notice textures, shapes. Actually, whatever you notice is fine, but my mind is engaged as I'm playing. I'm not just sitting there moving fingers. Let me just show you first what I would do. Let me play it more or less at the tempo. That's just the first phrase. Now let me take you to my ultra slow practice tempo and just show you just how slow that is. And I'm also going to show you, by attempting to give a voiceover, what it is that's going through my head. So as I start off, I'm aware that I'm playing a chord of D minor, and it's going to be in its root position, and it's going to have the third on the top. There's no way I can speak to you at the speed of all of these thoughts, but I'll give you some thoughts as I go along. Maybe I'll play it twice and show you some of the things that you might have going through your mind. The dominant chord next, a passing note in the alto to my tonic root, dominant minor. Oh, I'm noticing there I've got a chord of B flat major, which goes to the relative major, and immediately out of it again. C major, G minor. And I'm also noticing my tenor part is becoming quite florid. That's one series of thoughts that might be going along. The other, let me just sort of free associate as I play and see what else comes up for me. There's a moving part in the alto now. I'm thinking of my changes of finger. Change of finger 4 to 3 in my bass. Now I'm noticing contrary motion between my upper voice and my tenor voice. So what I would do, I can't resist singing as I do this as well. What I would probably want to do expressively is to make a little diminuendo in my soprano voice and a little crescendo in my tenor, you notice that rising tenor and actually rather beautifully florid tenor, major, minor, I'd want a colour there. Do you see what I'm already doing is introducing music into this. I'm not just wiggling fingers, I'm after colour, I'm after balance, total accuracy. So my tempo could even be as slow as this. Which is pretty slow. And I think what I would also stress with this, little bits at a time. You don't want to do too much of this. You're going to overload your working memory if you pick too big of a chunk. Little bits, it could be a bar, it could be a phrase, whatever you feel you can hold in your mind as you play. So let's talk about how to use ultra slow practice for refining motor control. That's these things here, our fingers. Now when I do this, let's say I'm playing this piece of Bach, the C minor prelude, Book 1, and the reason I'm using this example is because I've just made a performing edition of it, which you will find in the resources soon enough. Haven't quite finished it. So let's assume that I have learned it and I'm discovering that my fingers are a little bit uneven, and I want to just refine what's going on down here. Let me take just the first little bit of this, and I'm going to show you how we can use slow practice listening for complete evenness. I'm also noticing as I do this that it feels really good. I'm enjoying the tactile sensations of connecting with my keyboard, the bottoms of the keys. I'm also aware that I can just enjoy the feelings of the sounds that are coming, and so on. Everything completely even. Of course, I wouldn't suggest doing that and talking, because if you're doing that, it means you're not really listening. Let's say you've done a little bit of that, and you are just slightly concerned that your playing is sounding a bit dull and mechanical as a result of it. You can do it. Let me just show you now with the Schubert Impromptu that we've also got, that we have actually published. The E-flat Impromptu. I'm going to show you a little bit of slow, ultra slow practice, but with all the shapes and the tonal balances. So here, I'm noticing there that my left hand, did you notice the second note, this beat here? I'm touching it in really softly. Now I want to make a hairpin crescendo. So I exaggerate it much more than I would do. Did you hear that? I need a little pedal here. Sorry, it should have been, that'll teach me to talk as I play. What I'm attending to there, it feels a little bit like a meditation in that everything is done with space around it, it's done with serenity, it's done with enjoyment, it's done with care. Now, here's another really useful way of practicing ultra slowly. It's to measure distances that we couldn't possibly think of at the speed. Here's a variation from the Variations Sérieuses of Mendelssohn, which should go at about this speed. Roughly that speed. Now, when I practice it slowly, there's absolutely no value whatever in moving slowly. That's going to give me, well, I wouldn't say no value whatever, that's going to give me very little returns. But if I would do this, do you see what's happening there? The tempo is incredibly slow, but my movements are really fast. So I cover the keyboard precisely with exactly the right fingerings, of course, and I can even attend to my tonal balances there as well. In other words, top notes a little bit, how I'm voicing the chords. I'm always trying to connect that up to music so that it's not mechanical. Here's another example of Mendelssohn, the Ronda Capricciosa, which should go that kind of speed. Let me show you now. I hope you'll be able to see how fast I'm covering all those distances. Move. Get the idea there? Slow tempo plus quick movements. Now, if you can play, let's talk a little bit about using the slow practice for memory work. If you can play ultra slowly from memory, it's very likely that you'll know every single atom and molecule of the music. How about trying the left hand alone from memory? If you can do that, you are almost certain, I'm talking about at the slow speed, you're almost certain to reinforce, strengthen your memory. So there's all these uses for ultra slow practice. I'm going to be going into this a bit more as we move on through the resources in the online academy. It's going to come up again and again, and I will be demonstrating it and hopefully inspiring you to do it for yourself.